excellent preachers giving this so-so preacher some suggestions. We have Randy Frazee and Max Lucado. Now, there's probably, in my mind, no better storyteller than Max Lucado. And Max tells a story about 3 women who come together and write a pamphlet, just a little booklet. It's published by that very well-known publishing house, the Department of Justice. No, not very well known. It's entitled, When Your Child is Missing, and it's a 100-page booklet, and it's the one you don't want. It was written by 3 women whose children went missing. And in the booklet, it gives in some bullet points what you ought to do if your child ever goes missing. Let me give you some of those. First of all, it says, remember you're not alone. Second, hope is essential. Trust your feelings. Share them with law enforcement officials. Distribute pictures. Keep your focus. Exercise caution. And the final exhortation is, never stop looking. One of the key people that wrote this was the mother of a little boy who's been missing since 1989. She hasn't stopped yet. She's still looking. She still posts emails on all these blogs, on all of these sites, and all of these newspapers, letting her son know that they're still looking for her. That they're still looking for this little boy that has gone missing since 1989. Never give up. God is that same kind of parent. We went missing. We became lost. Remember, we started in a garden. We started in the presence of God. We started as God's constant companion. We started in all of this beautiful setting, and then we messed it up. And then our path started diverging from God's path. And God has never stopped from the very beginning trying to call us home, trying to find us again, trying to bring us back into his presence. Like this woman who wrote this pamphlet, God has never given up on you. Now, the Bible is the story of God's search. Now, we can look at it and we can say, well, you know, there's I've heard a lot of war, a lot of destruction. Yep. We haven't shied away from all of our waywardness. We haven't sugar-coated really how good we are. But one thing that runs constant through all of the scriptures, through the Old and New Testament, is God's constant love, his abiding search, looking for us in all places and in all times. He started out, first phase, was to bring together a nation of people who could serve as his priest, Israel. He didn't choose Israel because they were the mightiest. They weren't the most powerful. They didn't have the most resources. All they had was God. They were small. They were to serve as his priest. Did it work out? You read the Old Testament. Did it work out? Not exactly how God planned. Israel continued to be wayward. It loved the fact that God had chosen them to be his priest. And then they stopped at that. We're special. We're chosen. We're God's. Now, the other message was just as clear. You're not. And that was how they lived their life. And God says, that's not the way this is supposed to go. You're supposed to know these things, that you are chosen, that you are special, that you are separated out so that you can be a blessing to the world. And he started with that right in Genesis, telling Abram, you are blessed to be a blessing. We love the you are blessed part. We forget that we're supposed to also be a blessing. That was phase number 1. With that then came the law. The law had no power to save us. The law was simply there as a mirror, held up before us to say, okay, this is where you've fallen short. Can you understand that? Can you see where you've fallen short? Now I'm offering you a way back. But we kept missing it. Our solution was, well, let's just take down the mirrors. If I don't like what I see, let me not change my appearance. Let me just take down the mirrors. Then I don't know. The second phase, which we'll cover later on in the fall, was that he introduced finally a son, Jesus, who is known as the Christ, the Messiah, the Holy One, the salvation vessel for all of us. How? Well, we didn't seem to catch it through the law. We didn't seem to catch it through the prophets like Moses. And so he said, well, then I'll send a son who can demonstrate to you, who can show you what I look like, who can show you how I behave, who can show you what I'm all about. Because we tend to be visual learners, right? We didn't catch it all in word form, so we needed to see it. Darlene's going to talk about that more in about a month. And we're going to do some really special things with that later on. Third phase, and that's where we're at now, is the birth of the church. Following Jesus' time on earth, he recognized that what he could do as one person was this big. And what needed to happen had to be this big. So he gave them his power. He gave them his Spirit. He gave them the Holy Spirit of God, the third part of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the church was born. We went from 12 to 120 to millions. The book of Acts is the history of the church. Not only this church, but all churches. It is the history of who we are as the people of God. It is that step. And so listen again to those couple verses in Acts 1. And as they gathered around him, they said, Lord. That's step 2, right? Jesus is Lord. That's step 2. Are you at this time going to restore the kingdom of Israel? In other words, are you going to go back to step 1? What does Jesus tell him? Well, he says, it's not for you to know the times or the dates that the Father has set for his authority. But when you receive the power of the Holy Spirit, then, step 3, you will become my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Phase 3. This 3-phase plan has now begun to be pushed into fruition. It started, and you're part of it. 120 disciples, they wait in Jerusalem, just as Jesus had commanded them. Why? Well, there's a big holy festival going on in Jerusalem at the time called Pentecost. Pentecost is the Festival of Weeks, the Shavuot. It is the Jewish festival for the harvest, and it's also the time when the people of Israel would commemorate the giving of the law and the work of Moses. That was Pentecost. Penta, meaning 50. Came 50 days after the Passover, which was the time in which which God spared the lives of his people as he called them out of Egypt. So you have this religious festival. All of the people are gathered together. And it's not by coincidence that this happens to be the time that God sends his Holy Spirit upon his people. And when they come together, these 120, now think about it, that's not that big of a group. 120 people is all the church is at this time. Now that's 10 times the size of the original one, the 12. But it's still pretty small. 120 disciples. And all of a sudden they hear this mighty roar, this whirling wind. The Old Testament says it is